Good day, everyone. Welcome to Homily Chat. I'm Father Darryl Millette here in Saskatoon at the Cathedral of the Holy Family. Joining me as usual, Father Michael Liliedahl in San Francisco. How are you, Father Michael?
I'm doing well. I'm joining you from not the cathedral here at the parish of St. Stephen's, and on a special day. I don't know if people knew this about today. I always said, there are too many holidays in the world. There's National Peanut Butter Jelly Day. There's Macaroni and Cheese Day. There are all these kind of weird holidays. Today's the only one I care about. It's not just a national day. Today is International Buy a Priest a Beer Day. And so I kind of celebrated it earlier. Somebody noted to me, it is International Buy a Priest a Beer Day. Would you like to go get lunch and get a beer? And I said, I would love to go get lunch, but I can't have a beer because it's the middle of the day. And so it became International Buy a Priest an ice cream cone at the end of the lunch day. So it was a good day for me so far. How about you?
Thought is there. The thought counts, right? I mean, yeah, I was just given some beer as well. It's in the fridge chilling because it was warm. But I'm also leading adoration and hearing confessions tonight, so that will have to wait anyway. But
that's right. Maybe today is International Buy the Priest the Beer Day, and tomorrow is International Priest Drinks That Beer Day. So.
There you go. That could work. That could work. Mm-hmm. But no, this is actually so we skipped last week. Unfortunately, we just couldn't get the timing worked out. These kind of things. Hey, we're busy priests. I was gonna say we're busy pastors, but I'm not a pastor right now. But we have a busy pastor and then a parochial vicar here.
Well, not just a parochial vicar, someone who's also got a lot of responsibilities at the chancery. And so the difficulty is not only finding when I have the time to do it, but it has to be time that I am free, that Father Darryl is also free. So that's the kind of rotating, moving schedules that we're trying to hit there.
And I just started my classes today too. I had an hour and a half of Latin today. It's very exciting.
All right, but we're still going to do the show in English, right?
Yeah, and actually, so it was the very first lecture. So all the professor did was go over English grammar. Because he figured, you know what, we better all be up to speed on the English before we start diving into something else. So, because it's the terminology, a lot of the terminology is the same, parts of speech and so forth. Because then you can know what the differences are and learn maybe, hopefully a little easier that way. We'll find out.
We'll find out as well. So
we'll find out.
All I have to say is I'm glad it's you taking the Latin and not me. So
not yet anyway, right?
Sure. That's right. Sure. We'll see. Maybe one day. But that's part of obedience, right? If they ask me to do it, I will do it. But right now my plan is to not have to do that. But we'll see. You never know what happens. That's part of the joy, the surprise, and the life of a priest is you never know what might be down the road for you. You never know what your diocese may need and what they ask you to do. So
Correct. Well, one thing I'm pretty sure both of our dioceses will need us to do this weekend is preach
a homily.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was a really, I don't know. I don't know about that transition, but anyway, it's there. It's what it is.
It's there. It's what it is. But I'll tell you, this is better than some of those that I've done in the past. So.
Well, on that note, I don't remember who's doing what because I never do.
I think I'm reading for you.
Gospel, and the other one gives the first crack at examining it, and it's a pretty packed gospel. Not that long. It's not hugely long, but there's a lot going on.
And there's a giant pivot in the middle of it as well. So
indeed. All
right. So I think I'm reading it for you this week. So a reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you,
Glory to you, O Lord. Jesus and his disciples set out for the villages of Caesarea Philippi. Along the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" They said in reply, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others one of the prophets." And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter said to him in reply, "You are the Christ." Then he warned them not to tell anyone about him. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and rise after 3 days. He spoke this openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. At this, he turned around and looking at his disciples, rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." He summoned the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, Take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and that of the gospel will save it. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Lots going on. I think we were chatting a few days ago, Father Michael, and I think the big challenge, I think, this weekend will be to preach one homily, maybe two, I don't know. There's a lot going on. I mean, right at the beginning, you could preach on the identity of Jesus. Who do people say that I am? And, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, still others, one of the prophets. Who do you say that I am? You are the Christ, or the anointed one, the one chosen by God. In the Gospel of Matthew, the Son of the living God. There's a whole, what is the identity of Jesus? We could talk about that. Mm-hmm. And maybe you will. I don't know. That's probably not where I'm going unless you convince me otherwise, but we'll see. Then you could get into how Peter makes that incredible statement of faith. And, in the Gospel of Matthew, this is where Jesus calls Peter and, changes his name to Peter. You are rock. Upon this rock I will build my church. There's a whole thing there. I mean, part of that would involve saying, well, in the other gospel, it says this rather than the one that you've actually got in front of you. So I probably won't go that way either. And then Jesus tells them that, basically what is his mission going to entail? Ultimately going to entail the cross. And Peter rebukes him. You could preach on the nature of Peter and how, in many ways, even though he is our first Holy Father, he is, I think, very, we can identify with him. How often is it where we might have a time where maybe we, even within the same day or within the same hour, some great experience of faith, some incredible experience like that, and then we turn around and we sin, right? And it's often within the same day, within the same hour, within the same minute, whatever it happens to be. We can identify with Peter. And it always amazes me that, our very first Pope on earth, our very first Holy Father, leader after Jesus, that these are the kind of stories they include about him.
Yeah.
Which I find very comforting. So you could go about that way. But you know what? What's really striking me this time, I've basically said a lot about what I'm probably not preaching on. What is the nature of Jesus' mission? And what is our participation in that mission? That Jesus is he must undergo great suffering, be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, be killed, and after 3 days rise again. In other words, what's he doing here? He is quite literally reaching into the depths of where humanity needs him the most. Even letting our sinfulness, our rebelliousness wash over him. Even reaching into suffering, even reaching into death, diving right into that where we need him the most, where we need salvation the most. He goes right into it. And then what does he do? He turns it around and calls upon us to participate in his mission. So to take up our cross and deny ourselves, take up our cross and follow him, it could be read in the sort of, he just wants to make us suffer or something. But it's really, he wants us to actually share in his mission. He is sharing his mission with us. We're part of his body. We're baptized as part of his body. And he wants to work in and through us, sharing in his mission. And so that's kind of what's really, really striking me, that, whatever it is that we're undergoing, especially even if it's different forms of suffering, it can all be joined to his mission. Because we are in where humanity is needed the most. I mean, there's got to be a way of the challenge will be to nuance that, because it can be very deep and technical. But that's what's striking me in this reading. Out of all the stuff that's going on, that's what's striking me.
I like it. I like it. The one thing I might make sure to add on at the end, right, is by sharing in the mission of Jesus, we then share in his glory at the end. We share in his victory. So that's kind of not the consequence, but the reward of sharing in his mission here on earth, which will involve some suffering, but it leads to the share in his glory in heaven. And I was thinking about going that way. It was interesting when I was reading one of the commentaries about this reading. It made me think that perhaps they didn't quite divide the chapters right, because they said this is almost the halfway point of the gospel. And remember, when the gospels were written originally, they didn't have the breakdown of chapters. So it wasn't as if this was all in one particular chapter. They said this is kind of the halfway point. And the first half of the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is essentially revealing to them who he is, that he is the Messiah. He is the Christ. And I think that's one of the things I want to point out, is that Christ and Messiah mean the same thing. Christ is from the Latin and Messiah is from the Hebrew, but they mean the same thing. He who is anointed, the anointed one. And so they say, okay, we're getting, in the first half, Jesus is revealing that he is the Christ. And then we get Peter basically announcing that, yes, you are the Christ. Then we have Jesus saying, the second half is, but do you really know what being the Christ means? Do you really know what it means to be the Messiah? And he shows them, this is what being the Messiah means and entails and brings along with it in terms of responsibility. And then to kind of go your step further, this is what it means to share in that mission of Jesus Christ. Because the people at the time, the first century Jewish people, had a lot of ideas of what they expected the Messiah to be. This idea of a long-awaited Messiah. We have that advent, oh, come, long-awaited Messiah. They were long-awaiting a Messiah to come. And a lot of them had different ideas of what the Messiah was going to be. Some of them, and you have to remember, right, that who were anointed, who were the people that anointed? The positions that were anointed were priests, prophets, and kings. That's who got anointed. And so some people thought it would be a warrior king like David, that he's going to come and with this great military, he was going to throw off the Roman power at the time. And so their idea of a Messiah was a great military leader. Some thought, well, they had to come from the priestly line of Aaron. It was going to be this great high priest that was going to do something. And some thought the anointed was just going to be a prophet, this mouthpiece, but a great prophet that was going to kind of spur into action. And I think what Jesus is talking about at the second half of the gospel that he starts in today is, let's figure out what the Messiah is. What does it mean to be a priest, prophet, and king? Because he's going to fulfill all of those, and not only fulfill them, he's going to bring them to their complete fulfillment, but in a way that many of us don't anticipate, in a way that many of them at the time didn't anticipate. And you're going to see, when the chief priests, the scribes, the rabbis who make up the Sanhedrin, they don't crucify him and persecute him because they don't think a Messiah is coming. They just don't think it's him, because their idea of what the Messiah is going to be is not what Jesus is doing. With all that said, I'm following the Father Darryl's path. This is what I'm not going to preach on this weekend. What I was really looking at, and part of the commentary talked about this a little bit, and I was just so drawn and struck by it, is that phrase, along the way he asked his disciples. And that phrase, along the way, because the way is a very kind of common phrase that pops up quite a bit in the gospel. So even the earliest Christians, they weren't called Christians, they were called followers of the way. And, we often have paths, they describe the way of St. James or this way of pilgrimage. Jesus in the Gospels, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so this idea of being on the way is an idea of following Jesus Christ, but also that we are on a pilgrimage, that we haven't reached our final destination, that we are still kind of in progress. And so it's a question that he asks his disciples while they're still in progress, not at the end. It's not a final test. This is kind of just a reminder thing, not just who do people say that I am? What are people? He's not just saying, well, what are people saying? He asks a very personal question. Who do you say that I am? And that's a question that we are all asked right now because we are on the way as well. We are these kind of pilgrims, not at our final destination, pilgrims on the journey. And we are asked exactly that by Jesus Christ. Who do you say that I am? And I think sometimes, if we have to be honest, we sometimes we say along with Peter, you are the Christ, you are the Messiah, you're the anointed one, you are the priest, prophet, and king, you are the Savior. And sometimes I think if we're being honest, we would have to say, you are not quite God. You are maybe sometimes important, but not my all in all. You are him who I put 80% of my trust in. I think sometimes we don't give him our all. And so if we were to answer that question honestly, I think sometimes we'd have to have an honest look in the mirror and say, do I really believe what I profess I believe? And that's a question that I think is important for us to ask every single day. Who do you say that I am while we are on the way? Because we're on the way right now. And what is kind of interesting about this is, where do we know that way leads? That way leads to Jerusalem for Jesus. And what is Jerusalem? The site of the crucifixion and the site of the resurrection. It's going to lead to both of those. And it's not going to lead to one or the other, but one and the other.
And what I really like about that, now what I'm going to preach on. But did you take a look at the opening prayer, the collect?
I didn't take a look at the opening prayer.
All right, so guess what we're praying on Sunday?
Okay.
Look upon us, O God, creator and ruler of all things, and that we may feel the working of your mercy. Grant that we may serve you with all our heart. There you go.
Yeah.
We just prayed for what you're preaching on, I guess.
Yeah.
So that works out pretty well.
It'll go well. It may be the first time I actually have a chance to refer to the opening collect in my preaching. It's something I've wanted to do all the time, because the collects are so rich in their prayers.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'll kind of admit to this. It's probably not something I should do, but it is something that I do. Oftentimes, I don't look at the collect before the Saturday Vigil Mass. That I don't preview it. It's it doesn't really have any hard words usually. So it's not something I really kind of need to prepare on. And what I find is, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, that at least here in the United States, we don't rotate through the collect prayers. So I'll say that same collect not only on Saturday Vigil and for the Sunday Masses, but normally I'll say it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And it really starts to grow in meaning the more and more as I say it every day. And a different part stands out and I begin to apply it. And so I think it would be good to be able to do that before I start praying it, to kind of incorporate it into the homily. But it's just something that, honestly, I haven't had the time to be able to do. So
no, I mean, I've been actually doing that same practice that you've been doing all along in the United States for the last few years. Well, I'll use the same one, which I do find it very enriching to do so. I kind of like it. So, by the way, spoiler alert, in 2 weeks' time, pay attention to that collect. I've preached on that one before, the 26th.
Ooh, okay.
Sunday. Anyway, just saying.
Okay.
Just saying.
Perfect. And what's fascinating is this talk about suffering. We get one of the more beautiful, more recognizable first readings from Isaiah. Because in Isaiah we have a couple kind of poem type things which talk about this idea of the suffering servant. And so as I scroll up here to Isaiah, right? I gave my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who plucked my beard. My face I did not shield from buffets and spitting. The Lord God is my help, therefore I am not disgraced. I have set my face like flint, knowing that I shall not be put to shame. And so you get this beautiful poetic prophecy of the suffering servant. And I love that idea of tying in the Messiah and the suffering servant as being one and the same.
Yeah, no, exactly. As you said before, it's certainly not what many people in his time expected the Messiah to be. Often not what we might expect the Messiah to be. Yes, Jesus Christ is King. He is all glorious, all powerful. He is God, but yet he's also Emmanuel, God with us, even in our worst. He actually comes to us even in our worst, which is represented and shown in a powerful way in the cross. So yeah, the suffering servant, quite a way of describing the how we see it, describing the Messiah.
Yeah.
The one who would save us, right? I mean, it kind of ties into the second reading too, I suppose, right? Because second reading from the letter of James, it's very simple, but it's a very straightforward message, and a message that I think, speaking for myself, but probably all of us struggle to live out, right? It's just very practical. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is without clothing and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill, and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, What is the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I by my works will show you my faith. It all comes hand in hand, right? It's just not professing who Jesus is, but living, how he calls us to live, and living as a member of his body, right? So yeah, it's one of those readings that I know when I read it, it's definitely an examination of conscience. Probably should be for all of us,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. I remember I had heard this a number of times when I was in high school, and then I had a seminary professor say it, and he said it as if he came up with it, he invented it, that it was the most profound thing in the world he'd ever said. And I kind of want to be like, I've been hearing that for 10 years, but it is something to kind of to think about a little bit. He said, if you were put on trial for being a Christian, would they have enough evidence to convince you or to convict you? And the idea is, by the way I live my life, am I demonstrating my faith to the world by the way I live my life?
Yeah.
And like you said, that's a great examination of conscience, because if I'm being honest, sometimes the answer is no. And it's something I need to kind of work on, and I think this is a good examination of conscience, not to get into, homily chat or confession chat. But one of the things I know I struggle with sometimes going to confession is, I know my sins of commission, right? The things that I did that were wrong, but trying to figure out where I may have committed sins of omission, where there are things I should have done that I did not do. That's where I think this can really be an examination of conscience, to find sins of omission.
Yeah, absolutely. It's this particular topic was a rather large topic of discussion in the early 16th century in certain parts of Europe, the distinction of faith and works and whatnot. And I think this reading makes it very clear, as well as in 1999, the Catholics and Lutheran communities actually signed a letter basically agreeing on the theology of justification, where it really ties the two of these together. The reason we can do works is because we've received grace. We receive the grace from the Lord, and we show it by how we live, and we do the works as a result. So the one flows from the other. But yeah, it is a good challenging reading. So the challenge will be, I think, to preach one homily.
Or, as you said, two shorter homilies that one flows into the other. So
sure. A trinity of homilies. Maybe we're getting a little too far carried away.
We're getting a little too far there, I think so.
Probably.
And I love that it kind of ties in the gospel acclamation as well. The first line of it as well really ties in. May I never boast except in the cross of Christ. And I think that talks about the being united not only to the mission of the cross, but to the glory of the cross. Yeah. That what do we have to boast in except that we have been given this great gift of participating in the mission of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, exactly. One of the examples I often use to describe the mission of Jesus, the nature of the cross and whatnot is, in the case of if you have somebody who's needing rescuing from a raging river, and so you have somebody in the helicopter, a rescue worker being lowered down from the helicopter to where that person is, entering the condition of where that person is, all the wetness and everything in order to lift that person up. Well, then we're called to actually share in that mission. In following Jesus Christ, even, denying ourselves, taking up our cross daily and following him. Does this one say? No, this one doesn't say daily, this version, but yeah, taking up our cross and following him. Now that must have been an odd statement for the people of that time to hear.
Yes, and I was just thinking about that before you said that, right? Because they didn't know Jesus was going to be on the cross. And the imagery of a cross is very, very different when Jesus is walking around with his disciples than it is for us. It's certainly not something that people would wear, on a necklace or as an earring, or it wasn't a symbol of victory at all. It was a symbol of torture, of humiliation, of a death reserved for the worst of the worst.
Yeah. Like an ultimate symbol of suffering, of cruelty, take your pick, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that must have been incredibly almost shocking. Not almost.
Yeah.
Incredibly shocking to the people who heard him. I mean, no wonder if Peter turns him aside and says, "Hey, this can't happen to you."
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Because and I think they're not being unreasonable here, right? I mean, it is a truly a supernatural gift to be able to turn the cross into victory. And so if Peter is just kind of thinking rationally, his idea is the cross, right? If you have any association with the cross, that's the end. That's the end of not only your mission, that's the end of us as a group. That's the end of everything. It's going to end in humiliation, end in defeat, end in death and pain and torture. And that's not what the Messiah is supposed to be at all. So it's not as if Peter is thinking irrationally. He's thinking, I think, very rationally. But the problem is we are called not only to think rationally, but to think super rationally, it's kind of supernatural with the graces of God. So,
yeah. I mean, so I clearly need to do a lot more thinking about how I'm going to work this all out in a homily that doesn't last, longer than the liturgy of the word itself, kind of thing. But there's a lot to chew on. It's a great gospel, I mean, there's versions of this gospel in all, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. This year we're reading through Mark together, minus that little stint we had of John in the summer. But yeah, I think there's a lot to chew on. I mean, we didn't even get into the whole idea of Jesus says, "Don't tell anyone."
Yeah,
which he does very often, especially in Mark. He'll reveal who he is, and then he'll say, "Don't tell anyone," or he'll heal somebody and say, "Don't tell anyone."
And I think it ties into that point of he's getting people to recognize that he's the Christ and the Messiah, but they don't yet understand what that means. And so I preached on that in daily homilies a little bit. What is this idea? It's called the messianic secret, that Jesus, they know he's the Messiah, but he tells them not to say it. It's because they don't yet know what being the Messiah entails. They don't yet know that it means the cross. And so if they begin preaching a Messiah without the cross, they're missing the whole point.
Exactly. He's always getting at a deeper reality in that. Although some of it, I've heard of some people commenting, some of it might be, don't tell anyone, which is gonna, in human nature is gonna get them to tell it even more. But but I don't know. In this case, I think what you said is I would exactly agree and go down that road as well. So good. Well, I guess we have some work to do before the weekend. Do you have masses on Saturday as well?
We do. Well, we have a Saturday daily mass at 8 a.m. and then we have the vigil at 4:30. And so actually one of the things we'll be doing this weekend at our parish, because Saturday is the 20-year anniversary of September 11th. And so this weekend is as well. One of the things we're doing is as a communion meditation hymn. I guess we won't be singing. We'll be listening to the cantor sing the song that is the blessing that is said over the body at funerals, so that may the angels lead you to paradise.
Okay.
So we're going to have that sung as a communion meditation in honor of those who gave their lives on 9/11.
Right. Well, that's poignant. That's really poignant. Yeah.
So,
good. All right. Well, we'll pray for your country, especially this weekend.
Thank you.
20 years. Yeah, for sure. And on that note, do let us know what you heard this weekend. How many homilies did you hear? No, maybe don't say that, but
yeah. But another thing I might be interested to hear, especially if you're at a parish in the United States, is did your parish do anything to commemorate the anniversary of September 11th? And if so, what did they do? Because I think there's a way to do it correctly, and there's definitely a way to do it incorrectly. And so I'd be interested just to hear and to kind of hear what other places are doing. So if that happens and you have a chance, let us know about that. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. You can always head to homilychat.com. I almost forgot our website. homilychat.com. You can, subscribe to the podcast, all that kind of stuff there. Our Facebook page, all that kind of stuff is over there. So, we'd love to hear from you. And until next time, I don't know any Latin really yet, so enjoy.
So, we'll say just keep studying your Latin. Keep studying, kids.
Okay, take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.